Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out Live. We are going to talk about Brad Armstrong on this program. But, Jack, we're also going to talk about there's a debate, and there was a debate, and I think, Jack, you followed it when we did the 100 greatest wrestlers of all time. Caused a lot of controversy. I actually just there's how many wrestlers do you think throughout the years since 1930? How many wrestlers have been wrestling?
Oh, geez, I mean, thousands upon thousands.
So you would say at least 5 to 6 to 7,000 wrestlers?
Oh, I think you could add a zero.
Yeah. So when you think about that, and you're trying to get down to 100. When I first started it, I had 300 on the list, and I finally went it down to 100 because there's so many people that wasn't on it. Mario Galanto, Lynn Rossi. I mean, there's so many. Ron Wright. Those guys wasn't on it, and because a lot of people didn't even know who they were. A lot of people didn't know who Ron Wright was, but he was a legend in Knoxville. But right. we did a lot of stuff. Well, I put Brad as number 100. And some people said, okay, that's a good place for him. Some people said he should be further up, and I have no problem with that. I think Brad Armstrong, it could be the top 10. He was that good. But I want to ask you this question. I know you talk about professional wrestling a lot. When the name Brad Armstrong comes up, what do you tell the people?
He was the best I was ever in the ring with. I mean, just pure and simple. And I've been fortunate to be in there with a lot of great wrestlers over the course of my career. Brad was absolutely the smoothest, and he was also probably one of the most fun guys in the back too. Yeah. I don't think his potential was ever fully tapped. I really don't. I mean, he was so much better than I think people realize.
Yeah, I believe Brad Armstrong. He did not get the credit. And we'll talk a little bit about that when it gets to Mid-South Wrestling. And we're going to talk a little bit about him winning the North American title. And we'll talk a little bit about what happened with that. But right now we have a guest that knows Brad Armstrong. He was there when he started. Here is our special guest. You'll probably know him. If you watch Southeastern Wrestling for any amount of time, you're going to know this man. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Charlie Platt. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brent. How's everything going?
Everything is going great.
Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with the people across the state of Tennessee tonight. That is just been sitting here with my mom watching the news and reports, and what a tragedy, man! I tell you.
Yes.
Brad Armstrong. I'll go back to what Jack said. Probably, if I had to make a top 10, as far as work ethic and work in the ring, Brad was in the top 5. And through the years, from 1976 through the early 1990s, saw a heck of a lot of guys work in the ring. And Brad could work with a broomstick, put the broomstick over, come back in 2 weeks and sell it out again.
Yep.
That's, I mean, there's, and things like this have been said, and it's a shame, going back to what Jack said, that his potential was never seen. He, down here, I looked at something, and on this particular date, in 1984, you know who he was in, where he was on the card in Georgia?
Was he not on the top at that time?
he was on the top working with Ted DiBiase.
Yeah, because he was the national heavyweight champion, right?
Exactly. He was on top with Ted DiBiase. I've looked back at a few things that we did down here, and when he broke in, remembering how good he was from the beginning, work-wise, and watching him mold himself over a period of 6 to 8, 10 months, and to being able to do those interviews that were so important. They call them promos today, but back in the day, as you well know, Brent, there were interviews. They were 2 minutes and 3 minutes long, and you had to fill a lot of time. And the baby faces would take a minute and a half. The heels would take a minute and a half. And it took him a little while to get that. But once he got that, there was no stopping Bradley James. He was the best of the whole family, work-wise. He just, and comedian-wise, as it was said earlier, in the dressing room, he kept everybody in stitches. And if anybody came in with a down night, Brad had a talent of looking at that person, knowing something was wrong, and doing it in the right manner to lift that person up.
Yeah.
He sure made me look better than I was.
He made everybody look better than they were. One of the things that happened down here, one of the first major little angles that he was involved with was Flair was with us on TV. You've seen that episode, I'm sure, Brent.
Yes.
That Flair was there, and Brad came out, and Flair jumped Brad. And you talk about some heat, man. That was serious heat back in those days.
Now, when he first started, I mean, there's a who's who of who he wrestled against. I've got a couple of cards that he was on. Bob and Brad Armstrong versus Randy Rose and Plowboy Frazier. The Super Pro, which I think was Randy Rose, right? Was that who that was?
Exactly. It was. Yep.
Brad Armstrong versus Don Carson, and this would be in like August, September, October, November of 1980. Brad Armstrong and Norvell Austin versus Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey. Bob and Brad against Rose and Condrey. Saito. I mean, this is a lot of major people for his first couple of months of the wrestling business.
Well, you got to remember, and Jack knows this. This was the territory that everybody wanted to come to. The what they call the old Pensacola Mobile territory. You could live in Pensacola, stay out on the beach till 2:00 in the afternoon.
Exactly.
And make your shot to Birmingham. Come back home, sleep in your bed, and back on the beach the next day. So you had a load of talent that never did get to come in here, that wanted to come in here. And the money was pretty doggone good. You take Dothan. This has been talked about a lot, but I don't think some folks really realize it. And I've done a little research lately. And it's hard to believe, but it's true. In the 1981 time period, 82, Dothan, Alabama was outdrawing Miami Beach.
Yeah.
Dothan, Alabama.
Yeah.
Was outdrawing, when you look at the numbers, they run the Omni, once a month up there?
Yes.
We were sometimes, and Brent, you were a little snotty-nosed kid running around the ring back in those days, following your dad around. But that old barn out there, the farm center was full when we had the talent you just talked about, just about every week. So you take that times 4, you're at, 16 to 20,000 people a month coming to see wrestling in a town like Dothan, when the Omni wasn't even selling out every month, but they would, even if they sold out, that was 17,000 people.
Yep.
So this territory has probably the richest history when you look at that, Mobile, and what a learning ground for somebody like Brad. And coming up as in the James family, Bob taught him well. Jerry Stubbs taught him well. Jerry had a lot to do,
Well,
if I remember things correctly.
Talking about Jerry Stubbs, I believe Jerry Stubbs is with us. Hey, Jerry, how are you doing?
Hey.
Oh,
I think we've lost his audio.
he never knew how to. He never knew how to turn the microphone on. This is nothing new. This is just typical Jerry Stubbs.
Yeah, Jerry, I don't think your mic is working. Well, I think we lost him. Well, we did have Jerry Stubbs on.
Maybe he'll come back, but no, Jerry had a lot to do with the career of Brad. So many different guys did. I mean, and the guys that you mentioned, and I mean, Jack, what would it have been for you at age? What age we're talking about for Brad at the time, Brent?
He would have been in 1980. He would have been 18 years old, right?
All right.
Yeah.
What would you have thought if you were 18 years old working with Don Carson?
Yeah, man.
A master. I mean,
yeah.
Ron Fuller and I were talking about this yesterday on the phone, and he was preparing for a studcast. And he's gone back, and he said in 1976, 3 guys that drew more money in Knoxville, Tennessee, in that Knoxville territory than he ever thought about was none other than Don Carson and Dick Dunn and Leon Baxter. All 3 of them we've lost.
Yeah.
But they were the superstars. Leon and Dick were the superstars. And Carson was working the deal with the peanut butter glove and everything. And he said the money those guys drew and the sellouts they had and the outdoor amphitheater, he said he just never, until he went back and looked at some things that Bo James had put together, he never realized how great they were. And they were all talent from right here, except Don up in Cleveland, Tennessee. He came from Cleveland, Tennessee.
Yeah, right where I'm from. That's where I'm at right now. Jerry, did you? Is the audio working now? I don't think his audio is still working. Yeah, Jerry, I don't think your audio is still working for some reason. It was working when you first came on, though, wasn't it? I think it was working. So
I don't remember if I heard him or not.
I don't think I heard him down here.
Yeah,
he's definitely have some audio problems. Let me ask you this about Brad. When he first started, everyone said that he was as good as Bob was. And then years later, was Brad that good when he first started?
Jack, you get the heat. I don't want it. Go ahead.
Well, I didn't meet Brad till 85, 86, I guess. And I'm telling you, by then, he was a well-seasoned veteran. Of course, guys got that status a lot quicker back then because you worked all the time. But man, I've never heard anybody say anything about Brad not ever being able to work at any point in his career. So I'm assuming he probably started off pretty darn good.
Now, was Bob the only person who trained Brad, or was he trained by other people?
If we could get audio from Stubbs, he knows the story for sure.
Okay.
But I think Jerry and some other of the guys had a part in it. I really, if I remember things correctly, and before I forget this, one of the funniest stories about Brad, he was just beginning to talk a little bit. We were doing a personality profile, and of course that was pre-taped before the audience came in. And he's sitting there, yes sir, Mr. Platt, yes sir. And I'm wanting to just slap him, Brad, my gosh. But he was so proper with everything he did. And the director upstairs, we were watching a video from Montgomery. and it was a match where there'd been a little some kind of little confrontation angle, and we were going over that video, and the director or somebody pressed the wrong button, and when they did, they hit a button of the live show or the tape show that was on the air at the station at the time, which happened to be the Alabama JCs on the Red Holland show. You remember the Red Holland show, Brent?
Yes.
And about the time they hit that switch, they threw a garbage can full of rattlesnakes out on the pavement. And Bob almost killed his son running out the door, ran over him, ran over me and everybody else just from a video of rattlesnakes.
Now, early on in 1981, and I've got this down, January 20th, 1981, Brad Armstrong wins the United States Junior title. Was that from Jerry Stubbs?
It would have either been from Jerry Stubbs or, I forget who was campaigning at the time with that title, but there was several different. That was just it. We had so many coming through about that time. We even had this is one for Jack. We even had in that year, and I've got it's on YouTube, and I actually got to work with the guy on TV, and him doing color with me was Mario Galinto, and there was a deal where Mario was special referee, and I think it was a tag match in Pensacola with Bob and Brad against whoever the big heel team was at the time. But it could, the U.S. Junior title could have been on that. Bill Ash was also in here about that time with the junior. He was junior title holder for a pretty good while.
You know, also he would, at that same time in 1981, he went against Stan Lane. And was Chris Markoff working in the territory in 1981? Or was he just coming in and out of there?
Oh, probably just coming in and out, doing some shots in certain towns. I don't remember him full time at all.
But now Brad doesn't start wrestling full time to 1981, right? Was he only wrestling in 1980 some?
Just very limited amount toward the end of 1980.
All right, he hurts his shoulder at some point. Did he really hurt his shoulder when he first started?
I think so. I believe he did.
Because there's an interview with you on YouTube now with Bob, and he's in a sling. So I was thinking maybe that was he actually got hurt.
I think he actually did get hurt in a match in Montgomery.
You know, when something that went on there in 1981, and you probably remember this, and the only reason we knew about it because Tommy Weathers, which was refereeing at the time, they did I think it was in Mobile, where they did Bob was going to be handcuffed to one side, and I think Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose are going to be handcuffed to the other, and they did the turn with Tommy Weathers with the key in front of him. Do you remember that angle?
Exactly, I do. And Tommy sold out to him.
Yes.
I remember. That's what I remember.
Yes, and he did.
Tommy had more heat than your daddy and Larry Brock put together for a long time. In fact, he had to leave us. In fact, he managed for a while after that. They brought him. You know, he stayed around and did a managing thing with them. But you bring that up, and I remember it. Yes.
And how important was that? Because they were drawing Bob and Brad against Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose. Didn't that go on for about 6 months?
It went on for a pretty good run. Sure did.
Drew. I mean, there was what people don't understand. They were selling out the Boutwell Auditorium. They were selling out the Dothan Farm Center. I mean, they were going to Mobile I guess they was running the Expo Hall at the time. They were selling it out. I don't think people realized how much Brad and Bob on the main event against Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose was packing them in.
Exactly. And you got to understand, Birmingham at that particular time, my memory correct, we had just started running Birmingham in the latter part of 1980. That was part of the Jarrett deal. Not Jarrett, but Nick Goulas.
Okay.
And see, for a long time there, Birmingham was not a part of Southeastern for a couple of years. I said a long time, a couple of years. And that came in, I think we went on TV up there in 1980 on Channel 6 WBRC. So we were not in Birmingham, hadn't been in Birmingham that long when those matches were coming down. And yeah, look, Randy, when you talk about underrated, you talk about Brad Armstrong being one of the smoothest and best ever in Southern Territory wrestling, Jack. I'm not talking about, something off the Superstation or I'm talking, well, he was there, but I'm talking about guys that could day in and day out get in that ring and make those people want to plank their money down week after week after week. You got to look at Randy Rose. You got to look at Dennis Condrey. You got to look at the crew that was in here. And I've talked about this before. A lot, if you'll go back and look, a lot of what the success of this area was a heck of a lot of them were trained by a member of the Welch family or someone who was trained by a member of the Welch family. And it just blended so well, the work style in the ring. Jack, I'm going to ask you to comment on that.
Oh, I agree. I mean, they had a certain pattern they had. And fans really clicked with that. It was a formula that worked. I loved it.
What a lot of people don't realize is down here, when I say down here, the Southeastern Territory, it never was big on what I'm going to call the freaks of the business.
Right.
Abdullah Butcher never, and Abby's a great guy, he never drew a plug nickel down here in this territory. He never worked this territory but one time, and that was when Barnett was running it for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Abby never drew here. The only person like that drew money here was Andre. And Harley killed Andre off in Mobile, and after he body slammed him 2 times in one match, Andre didn't draw again in Mobile. I mean, Harley did, but Andre didn't. But the bigger type guys like that did not draw money and did not mean down here what they did in other parts of the country and what they are today.
Right.
When in October of 1981, Dad was in Georgia Championship Wrestling, and they had told us, they said, hey, Bob Armstrong's coming in, and we heard that he was going to be the booker, and he was bringing his son Brad. Now, we had not seen Brad before this, and we said, oh, okay, we'll see how that goes. I can tell you, the first time we saw him on television, I was very impressed with Brad, thinking he is a 19-year-old kid coming to Atlanta, and he was very good at what he did within 1 year in the wrestling business. And I remember Dad telling him, he said, you are going to be a big star in the wrestling business.
Oh, yeah. He was, and I tell you something that happened just a short period of time ago. We did a tribute to Bob here in Dothan. It was no wrestling in it. It was just me and Ron, and we got videos sent in from a lot of different people across the country. And somebody that talked more about Brad than they did about Bob, and it was in a sense of, you should be proud of what you were responsible bringing into this earth, was Ted DiBiase. He talked about, from the first time he saw Brad, what impression that Brad made on him. And I don't know of anybody that has ever said anything negative about Brad at all. I've never, I'm sure there's some somewhere who have, but I would say they would be of a jealous kind that just were jealous because they didn't have that was a special talent that he had and I'm not being downing Scotty or Steve or Brian, or even Bob, but it was a talent that none of the rest of them had.
Bob told me that, Brad was the best of them.
Exactly.
They all know that.
Well, when he came to Atlanta, I mean, these are the guys he got to wrestle against: Torquemada and Ray Stevens, Brad Armstrong against Jim Duggan, Ole and Gene Anderson, Ray Stevens and Austin Idol, and then on November 26th,
Austin Idol.
Yes, it was.
You're saying don't say the word wrestling.
I'm sorry.
That you need to be corrected on that, boy.
Well, okay, we'll say he was in the ring at that point in time against Bob and Brad. And then on Thanksgiving night, November 26, 1981, Bob and Brad win the national tag team titles, beating Saito and Mr. Fuji. 19 years old, he's the national tag team champion and I will tell you, he also later on in the year he went against Terry Gordy and Buzz Sawyer. I mean, the people he got to wrestle, Tommy Rogers, Johnny Rich. I mean, the people that he got to wrestle during that time, he had to be good at that time. And I'll tell you the one thing that Bob and Brad drew good money as a tag team in Atlanta.
Oh yeah. I got a question for the host. Out of all the people, and you saw most of them, Georgia and down here, of the people he worked in the ring with, who was the best match he would work with, in your opinion?
Jerry Stubbs.
All right, Jack?
I'll have to say the same thing. I was actually during the early 80s, I was in Germany. So I've had to go back and watch this YouTube stuff. And when I find those matches, that's what I watch. They were great.
In that 80s period we're talking about there with Jerry and Brad, I agree 100%. That was my man. But there's another one that comes in a close second. Tom Pritchard.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Tom's kind of in a class by himself too, like Brad, I think.
You put those two in the ring together, and you watch the audience. And I had a hard time watching the audience because I was watching them. And there again, Brad and Jerry are two of the guys. You're part of the business like I am, like Brent is, like Jack is. You don't go out there and watch every match. But when certain guys go to the ring, you want to see what they're going to do with different people. And Jerry, I hate to say this about him, he's kind of like Brad. He can work with a broomstick.
Yes.
And make the broomstick look real good. I tell you what, the talent, though, going back to it one more time, and the talent we had down here, was just, you could not compare the roster here with rosters in other parts of the country and territories. No. It was a mismatch with a lot of other territories that you would look at, but down here, from the opening match to the main event, it was all quality.
Yeah, I agree. It was unique because Georgia Championship Wrestling didn't have that. They had probably one or two matches on the card, the main event and the semi-main event, but the rest of the card wasn't stacked like it was in Southeastern.
Well, yeah. Another part of that is going back to Bob and his booking, and Ron and his insight of the business being handed down for generations. They made everybody on the card through television. We did the TV matches, and everybody had a little part in it. Some angles were bigger than others, but everybody played their part. And down here, you could get beat on TV, and 2 weeks later, you were second from the top or main event. I've seen it many, many times.
I just found a picture. I don't know if y'all will be able to see this or not. See if you can see this. I just sent a picture of. I guess this was Brad during his first year. Let me see if I can pull that up. Can everybody see that?
I got it.
Yeah, that's Brad and Jerry. Would that be his first, or would that be later on?
That was probably about the second year, I would think. Might have been the first. One thing about that Brad and Bob, you don't really recognize them good without their Coca-Cola glasses on.
Well, now, okay, now I've got one of those. Let me pull that up.
Oh boy,
I've got a picture, and they're with. Let me pull this one and see if there they are with Blondie.
There you go.
There's Brad. Blondie. Bob Armstrong was Blondie's favorite wrestler.
Really?
Yes. Wow. When they were working Georgia Championship Wrestling, she called and asked if Bob could be at her concert, and they went to the concert. That's where that picture was took.
Do you have the picture of Brad where he's covered up with all the belts? You ever see that picture?
No, I don't think I have that one.
They made it in the locker room, and every belt that was in the territory was, he was wearing two, and he had one over each shoulder and holding another. And the little caption somebody wrote on it was, I think the Booker's son's getting pushed too hard. And I remember seeing that. I don't remember where, but I remember talking with Brad about it, and he said, "Yeah, that was a rib, that they pulled on Bob at the time."
Going back to what Jack just said, being in the position that I was in, I would, be in both dressing rooms, and I never heard any of the boys criticize Bob for anything he did booking with Brad. No. I never, and I think it was out of respect because Bob did not push in a way that maybe in other situations, we don't have to call any names or anything, but it was done. But he didn't, Brad was one of the boys. And his ability to work as good as he did, everybody had respect. And Bob's one that I never. We were talking about this the other day. Doing TV, you have to listen to a lot of different people, but I don't ever remember any of us having a heated conversation with each other in this territory. Do you, Brent?
No, I don't think
there was never any yelling in the dressing room. It was the most cordial working relationship for the business that it was that you could get. Now,
so it was all family, though. I mean, everybody, we were all family. So
it was. Now, in some of the days of Continental, it got a little crazy from time to time. Yeah. But that was Paul Heyman. I mean, he's a fool to start with. And when you get a New York fool trying to tell everybody in the business what to do way back then at his age, you had a little bit of heat.
Yeah, he's not like us.
No, he didn't come from nowhere around here, I guarantee.
Yeah.
When Bob was going to go back, I guess he was going to come back to go back to Alabama, and I guess he was going to take over the booking back in Alabama. Dad came to Brad and asked him to stay. That he was in Georgia, and he said, "Listen, I think you should stay here. I don't think you should go back. I think this is you need to stay here." So and I don't blame Brad for not leaving, because at the time Brad was making between $600 and $1,500 a week in that Georgia territory. So
not bad for those days.
No, it was pretty good for those days. So I don't. But at some point he comes back to it.
he did come back, and it was in an angle where he was supposed to be there, and he wasn't going to be Bob. I don't know if he was going to be Bob's partner or what the deal was, but his flight was delayed. And he comes in at the last, you remember that, Brent? He comes in at the last minute. Am I right on that?
I think so, yep.
Yeah. And it was, where's Brad, where's Brad, where's Brad? And I believe it had to do with the nightmares, maybe.
I don't remember really.
It's out there.
I remember.
It's on YouTube. I saw the episode maybe a year ago, but that episode is out there, and it was he comes in and saves the day at the last minute.
All right, now he does come back later on and does an angle where Bob is on his way of turning heel, and he actually slaps Brad on television. How important was Brad to Bob's turn? I know it was important for him because I think he also slapped you. So, but how important was it to get Bob the heat that he needed by slapping Brad?
If I'm not mistaken, the slap you're talking about where Brad took place on Atlanta TV, not down here.
Oh, okay.
It took place in Atlanta. The deal with Bob slapping me got plenty of heat. It was probably one of the hottest angles ever done because nobody had ever laid a hand on me. And, you know, sometimes the moon, the stars line up just right. The day before we did that angle, we had built up the heat with Bob and I for a matter of 2 or 3 months, and I just got to where I would get up and leave the announcing table. And what happened was my first son, my firstborn child, was born on a Friday. Well, being on radio and TV, they announced it on the morning show down there. They did it on the news at 6 and 10 o'clock on Friday. And then on Saturday afternoon, this Bob Armstrong, complete with cigarette in his mouth, comes out there and slaps me. And, buddy, it got hot. It got so hot that they had to escort him from Dothan back to Gulf Breeze to his house. It took 8 police to get him from the dressing room to the ring. The whole thing, and when the tape went around, it got so hot that he comes back and says, "You got to slap me on TV to take some of his heat off." So about 3 weeks after the deal, we did the deal where Ron comes back in, grabs him, hooks him, and I slap him on TV. It was hot. And during that time, he was working a little heel deal up there in Atlanta too, back and forth. And he slapped Brad. If I'm not mistaken, Brad's slap was on Atlanta TV, and they sent it down there, and we played it on our TV.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember that happening, and I thought, that would have probably helped get him some heat.
Oh yeah.
After Brad leaves Atlanta, he leaves Atlanta in April of 1983. Kevin Sullivan is booking in Florida, and he goes and he ends up teaming with someone that would later become a huge star, and that's Terry Allen, Magnum TA, and they become the NWA Global Tag Team Champions. Does anybody remember when he went to Florida for Kevin Sullivan?
I don't, because you got to remember, there wasn't an internet back then, boy.
Yeah, I was back from Germany the end of '83, but I was the only thing I could get was the Mid-Atlantic area where I was stationed at. So I didn't start catching back up with Southeastern stuff till I moved back in '85 to Alabama.
Well, it looks like he was only there for about 3 months, and he went against I didn't even know the Kangaroos was still wrestling back in 1983. Don Kitt and Johnny Hefferman. I didn't even know there was wrestling then, but he wrestled them. Leroy Brown. The Kevin Sullivan, Purple Haze. He actually went against Adrian Street while he was there, and they actually won the titles from Angelo Mosca and Bobby Duncan. And he was only there for a few months. So I wrote down here he was there for 3 months. I really never knew until I did the research that he actually went there and worked. But I did hear in an interview that he did years ago. Jack was telling me a story about who was it that ran Brad over?
Juventud Guerrera.
And he hurt his and he hurt his leg. Well, he was telling a story that Kevin Sullivan actually ran him over in the parking lot, and he went on top of the car, and you know how Kevin Sullivan's crazy anyway, and he was just sitting there laughing as he was rolling off the car. But I really never knew he wrestled, and then didn't know really that he was tag team partners with Terry Allen until I started doing this research.
There's so much that when we go back to that time period you're talking about, that unless you were in that particular area, Jackie didn't know anything about it. Even us as close as we were to Florida, we ran the Northwest Florida Panhandle, of course, but we didn't know what was going on down there. We didn't know what was going on in Memphis, and we were fortunate enough that TV was to the point to where Mobile, you could run basically the same match in Dothan. You could run the same match in Montgomery, because there wasn't the TV in Montgomery was a UHF station, and it didn't get out as far. And then Birmingham was WBRC Channel 6, so we could run all the same card in Dothan, Montgomery, Birmingham, and Mobile. We switched up for towns like Pensacola that caught a little bit of both sides. And of course, you had to run something different anyway. But those towns that maybe caught the same TV, we would run a different card for those spot show type things. Right. But you run one match, one card all the way around the territory.
Didn't Ron Fuller, didn't he turn down a lot of magazine coverage too for that very purpose, so that
exactly
people didn't know what was going on?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that I was reading a story on Bill Apter and all these people praising Apter for this, that, and the other, and I thought, well, we never got into any of the wrestling magazines in our day. We had the best talent, but he would not allow it. He wouldn't allow them in the building. I mean,
looking back, that was smart business.
Oh yeah, it was smart business. That might have been why we were drawing the big crowds that we were.
Yeah.
We kept kayfabe, and it was a protected industry. It was a protected business. We gave their fans more than their money's worth, but we didn't take Santa Claus away from the kids.
Exactly.
Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense.
When you take Santa Claus out of the picture, that was the first big spike in the coffin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've always said, people knew, a lot of people did, but that didn't mean they wanted you to tell them.
I always said that 75 to 80% of the people who came and paid their money every week to see the show knew in their heart that it was a show.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, they didn't want to hear it. And the thing that I'm so proud of the guys, and I'll go back to your Randy Rose, your Jimmy Goldens, your guys that took, Dennis, those bumps and everything they took. Never a night went by at that farm center that even the biggest skeptic, or the person that thought, well, it's just rehearsed skit they're doing.
Yeah.
You'd be at the door when they leave, and you'd hear them talking to each other and saying, "Boy, did you see that? What happened to Jack Lord tonight? Man, that Condrey boy, he hurt him."
A friend of mine, Mike Mason, and I were talking the other day about that. And for us, and I think for most in the industry, the greatest compliment that I ever got was when a fan would come up after a show and say, look, I know it's a show and I know y'all are friends, but you really got mad at that guy. You really tried to hurt that guy today.
You got my point. And
That's
was,
it.
and Brent knows it because he lived it down here. The heat sometimes when you would be, you would look for a place to go hide because the heat sometimes when the matches were over were I mean, on the full moon, let every baby face win on the card because if you were in Panama City or in Harlan, Kentucky, you get hurt.
Yeah. What was it Johnny Valentine said? I can't make you believe in wrestling, but I can make you believe in me. That is a great quote.
You know, people used to say that when they would be. I used to go to Rome, Georgia, every Thursday night with Dad, and they would have the match, and the main event would be Ole Anderson and somebody, and you'd hear them. These are the words they would say: "Oh, we've seen all of that. That wasn't real." But Ole Anderson's coming up, and this is going to be real. They believed everything that Ole Anderson did.
Exactly, and there were several folks down here, and Ron would fall into that category. Bob would fall into that category. There's several of the guys that when they went to the ring, folks, this is real, and that's. All those wraparounds that he gave folks, you know, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, you know what? The reason the people believed that everything Ron Fuller was doing was real because the guys he was working against figured out that everything he was doing was real.
Exactly. Bob told me one time he never went to the ring without taking at least 3 Tylenol because he knew when the wraparound came, he was going to feel it all the way down to his toes.
Well, you know, really and truly, Ron and Bob both probably needed some contacts while they were in there wrestling each other.
Ooh, you know, it's amazing that they worked as. I mean, that's why they hurt each other. I guess they had to work. They had to work so close because they couldn't see each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never had any tight punches from Bob, but those chops. Woo!
Jack, was you back from Germany by 1984?
Yes.
Do you remember when they did the angle with Brad Armstrong where he won the title on television?
I remember hearing about it. I didn't get to see it.
They did the angle where, for some reason, Tommy Rich was under the Masked Mr. R. I'm not really for sure why he was under that, but he
leave town.
And did he leave town? He came back as Mr. R.
DiBiase. Yeah.
And so they did this thing, and they said something like Mr. R was going to go against him, and it was actually Brad Armstrong. And that's how he won the national. I think Tommy Rich came walking out, and he pulled him up. I think
they were dressed in matching tracksuits, and Tommy comes walking out during the match, and Ted has pulled the mask off Brad, I think, right around at this point. And of course, then he turns around and sees Tommy standing there, and I believe it was pretty quick. Brad rolled him up from behind, won the belt. It was something else. I mean, it was really good.
It was a good angle. Then he becomes the national heavyweight champion, and I would say he was what? If I'm doing my math, 1980 was 18. This would have been 1984. So he was 22 years old. He's the national heavyweight champion at 22 years old.
80. I was 19 in 80, and he was 17 in 1980.
So
he's 2 years younger than me.
A very young national heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
But you know, that has to say something about him because Charlie knows this. Ole Anderson didn't like nobody. Okay.
I know he didn't like me. There was a quick story on that. A little bit before Ron and Bob and Robert, Jimmy, everybody took over this territory, Barnett made a lease purchase agreement with Lee Fields. They run Atlanta TV in here for 6 weeks. And they did 2 shows. And the 2 shows, the talent roster was Backlund, Abdullah, Wrestling 2, Slater. In fact, it was a very, very young and just into his career, Jerry Stubbs and Randy Alls that were the early in the show. But that show didn't draw 500 people.
Yeah.
Either time they came in. Ole was booking, and it's because the TV wasn't from here. It was not a local product, and people did not buy it. Well, Ole had my phone number and everything, and he had that sawmill up in Michigan. And I get a call at the radio station, and it was in between the 2 shows, and it was Ole Anderson. And Ole says, "You need to go to Elba, Alabama. I have had a custom blade made for my sawmill at Dorsey Company up there, and you need to pick it up for me and drive it to Atlanta." I said, "Screw you." So Ole and I never got along too good after that, but they ran one more show in here, and that was it. They gave it back to Lee. Just, here it is. We don't want it. And then Ron's first show in here with Andre didn't draw but 800 people. It was off of TV being done in Knoxville. But when the TV got that local flavor to it, even the people in Mobile knowing it was done in this territory, things turned right around. And I think that's a big problem today with what they're trying to do. TVs are done in the arenas, and I really think back in the old days of studio wrestling, people got a lot more out of that and made them want to buy the ticket to something that they don't get to see. They didn't get to see on TV, and that's the arena shows themselves. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, see, I think that's the appeal to me of NXT, because they film in that one place down there in Florida.
Right.
It's your same crowd coming in for TV every week, and they love what they're seeing. And I think it's a great product too. But I don't think they draw very well when they're out touring, per se. I don't know. I haven't checked numbers in a while.
I read an article Mike Mooneyham had, or maybe it was just a post that Mike had on his Facebook page, and Mike is the go-to man for the business as far as journalism goes.
I love Mike.
and he was talking about that, Jack, the fact that this local show that's been running 14 years up there in Charleston one town near Charleston, drew so many people the other night. And it was actually, somebody said it drew more than what an NXT show drew out on the road.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 300 people.
Yeah.
You can't make that cash flow.
Yeah.
I've noticed that older wrestling fans, the disconnect to the newer product is really bad. I mean, the older wrestling fans hate it.
Oh yeah, they can't. And I go back to when corporate America got involved in the business. That was the beginning of the end, even before Vince said we're entertainment. When corporate America, people that did not understand the business got involved. Business people. And I'll give you an example right here in Dothan. This happened. Your dad was involved in this. They came and did TV in Dothan. They did 3 TV shows. There were 20-something matches on the card. Of course, Ronnie was having to go back and help with this and help with that. And he asked me, I just came down to visit him that night. And he asked me, would I do him a favor. And I said, what? He said, here's the briefcase with all the sheets in it. Go check up with the building manager. This was at the Dothan Civic Center. Capacity Dothan Civic Center is roughly set up for something like that, 2,200 people. I get up there and start doing the house, and I'm ignorant about this. I'd never done one of their shows. And all of a sudden, they start throwing this $2,800 bill out for catering. They start throwing this bill out for this and that. Then $30-something thousand rent on their trucks that were there doing the taping, okay? And then they only sold $10,000 worth of tickets. And I said, what? They were afraid. Turner never wanted, and the company never wanted anybody not in a seat. They had papered the town and turned down over 2,000 people outside that came the day of the show wanting to pay and get in.
Yeah.
Henceforth, the show lost about $30,000.
Yeah, they did that. They did that everywhere. When they come to Chattanooga, it was our job for years to actually paper the thing. They did Halloween Havoc here, and we were paid to actually go out and give tickets out so there would be people inside the building.
I remember that Halloween Havoc show because I called your dad and said, I said, can you get me some comps? And he said, yeah, how many you want? And I said, 4. And he said, okay, just pick them up at Will Call anytime you want to. So I just happened to be in Chattanooga the next week, and then Halloween Havoc was like maybe 2 weeks out. And so I stopped by, I picked up the tickets, I opened the envelope, and there's 30 tickets in there. So I'm giving tickets to everybody at every show, you know.
Well, Jimmy Powell was running a show in Cleveland, and I was doing the announcing there, and I was giving tickets to everybody that came in the building. So Jimmy started telling people, so if you come to our matches, you'll get free tickets to Halloween Havoc. I think that was the night Abdullah the Butcher got electrocuted on television.
I'm not going to say that I might not have sold T-shirts with free tickets, you know, at the show beforehand.
Confession time.
Business is business, boys.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, professional wrestling, it's there's nothing like it.
Going back to what we talked about, I want to say a couple of things, and I need to step out of here. Okay. Brad, the James family. Not long ago, I went down and visited Bob and Gail, and folks that might be watching this, just say a prayer for them. You know, we all go through tough times.
Yeah.
And Bob has the best attitude anyone could have about a tough time.
Yeah.
He's remarkable. But say a prayer for that family. Yeah. And I never will forget when we lost Brad. That was a tough trip. I had open heart surgery in May of that year. And that was one tough I didn't have to have, they didn't need to do any further stress testing on me after that. If the graphs held during that event, I knew I was good.
Yeah, I think that was the last time I saw you was at the funeral.
Probably, yeah, might have been. And we have lost so many great friends. And at the top of that list as well is your dad. Ronnie was one of those guys that never had an argument with. We had disagreements, but we never argued. We'd just say, hey, back and forth to each other, but there was never any heat.
Right.
He was the most obliging person to work with and to be around that anybody would ever want to deal with. And Brent, you know how much I loved him. He was a dear friend, and I miss him. And a lot of these reunions, like the Mobile reunion and some of these things, I kind of got to where I hate to go to them, Jack. because all those close ones, they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Ron and I talk to each other every week or every couple of times a week. And for all of us old timers in the business that worked together and got along together, and there's only a handful that I didn't get along with, and they know who they are. But for all of us who did get along, and Bob and I never end a conversation, and Ronald and I never end a conversation without saying, love you, man, because we did a lot of things together that we never knew what we were doing when we were doing them, and setting the stage for big things that were done in New York. We pioneered a lot of things, not knowing that we were doing it. If we had known we were doing it, every episode of Southeastern Championship Wrestling would have been archived. Yeah. Same thing with Continental. Same thing going back to the old Gulf Coast days. All your territories would have done it. For pricing purposes, we recorded over those tapes every week. People come up to me all the time and say, hey, I know you've got a big collection of tapes. I said, I don't have any.
Yeah.
You don't either. I mean, we've got a few snippets that we've got off of YouTube and things like that. But man, there were some things that went on in the TVs that didn't get saved. Of course, you couldn't play them today. You'd get put in jail for some of the angles we did. The old Charlie Cook stuff. I mean, you just couldn't do that again.
Well,
but
for me,
I was just blessed to get to work with the best of the best in the business.
Yeah. For me, that's been kind of advantageous because my booking style is I redo a lot of those angles.
Oh,
and nobody knows about them. So
send us a check if you don't mind. You know, in wrestling, nothing is new. Everybody goes back. Ric Flair goes back to Buddy Rogers. That goes back to this, and you know, the Gorgeous George days and things like that. It was just recycle, and rehash.
Yeah.
But we had a group down here that was probably the most unique territory in the history of professional wrestling.
Yep.
Going back to when the Welch family started in 1953, all the way through the closing days of Continental. It was a product that you could look back and say, hey, I'm glad I was a part of it. And I was blessed to be a part of it. You guys are great. Brent, anytime, give me a call. And Jack, good to be on with you tonight, sir.
Good to see you too, brother.
Thank you, Charlie.
Y'all have a good one.
All right, bye. It was good to have Charlie on here. Charlie he is a legend, and anybody that watched Southeastern Wrestling, you know, I've kept in contact with Charlie mainly through Co-Brother Circus when I was promoting there. We went every year to Dothan, and I always hang out with Charlie while I was there. I want to finish up something. I want to finish up a little bit about Brad's career. I want to talk a little bit about the national heavyweight title reign that he had. He would go against people when he won that title. Here's a list of some of the people that he would defend the title against: Jake the Snake Roberts, the Spuller, Larry Zbyszko. I mean, the list it goes on and on. And I was trying to touch on something. You know, I was touching on a little bit of that. The thing about Ole, it's for Ole to give Brad Armstrong that push. That had to be Ole really had to have a lot of confidence in Brad.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that. And plus, every time Brad would leave, he would call him back. He would leave for a while. He went and worked for just a little bit. He went back to Southeastern Wrestling in the end of 1983, and I mean, business was a little slow during that time because Dad had got out of the business, got back in the business, and he was working there. Wayne Ferris was there, Ron Starr. I mean, business was bad, So I don't blame Brad. He stayed there for about 2 months, and he left and went back to Atlanta. And he had a good run in 1984. I think Brad that was probably his biggest run he had ever had. So but then when he gets to North American, he wins the North American title. When he leaves there, he does go to Mid-South Wrestling, and I think we need to pick up there on the part 2 because there's a lot about Brad winning that North American title. Some people say he wasn't a good North American title holder, but he wasn't given the chance to be a good North American title holder, and I want to talk about that and kind of get the people how Brad got there. And why he got there, and the reason he came right in and became the North American title. There's a major story there, and we'll pick that up on the next episode. And we'll probably do it in the next few weeks, and we'll talk about it. But next week we're going to talk about Bill Superstar Dundee. Yeah, this man. There's some stories about him. We'll see if we can get a couple of special guests on. I do want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank Chad Wheat. He says, "Hey, I'm in Rome, Georgia now, and remember those days." And I think, Jack, don't you have wrestling matches in Rome, Georgia now?
Yeah, we do. KLT Promotions at 2561 Shorter Avenue. March 14th is our next show.
All right, so get down there, Chad, and see that wrestling. It's old school wrestling. It's what you like. So get down there. There's a Rodney West. That is an awesome interview. I don't think that's my brother. I'm not for sure that's my brother, Rodney West, but it could be. But
close enough.
It could be, but I'm not for sure. Also, I want to thank K. King Sr. He said Brad Armstrong, in my opinion, should have had a TV or U.S. title reign, had one of the sweetest drop kicks in the history of the business. And I would agree with him with that. He did have a good and the worst drop kick in the history of wrestling, Michael Hayes.
I've had them both.
Oh man, Michael Hayes and his drop kick. But anyway, Chad, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for being a part of this show. I do want to tell you, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. And if you're watching on here, please share it. And right now, I want to tell you the 100 top greatest wrestlers of all time. Leave your comment. This show will be airing for the whole week. So leave your comment of who you think should be on the top 100. Jack, thank you so much. We'll see you next week right here on Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. And thank you very much, Jack.